Well, we're headed towards the first Saturday in May, but it is the first Saturday in March, and it's a big stop on the path to the Kentucky Derby. Nick Tammaro here to take a look at the Fountain of Youth on Saturday afternoon at Gulfstream Park, joined by my usual companion, Scott Shapiro. Scott, how you doing, buddy?
Doing all right, Nick. We're really looking forward to a massive weekend of racing here, particularly Saturday, of course, with the Fountain of Youth, big card at Gulfstream, out west at Santa Anita, big card, a couple of other points races, including the Battaglia at Turfway, and things are heating up on the human side of things with the Kentucky Derby leaderboard competition at TwinSpires. We have a new leader after Confidence Game. Sprung the upset in the Rebel Stakes. It's Dave from Wisconsin, my college state. Dave, good job. 171. Michael from California at 169. And it's kind of a bit back to the rest of the field, but plenty of opportunities this weekend to jump up and get yourself up on the top of that leaderboard, Nick.
Still a lot of opportunities there, indeed. As Scott said, well, let's turn to the equine side of it, which we'll start with the Fountain of Youth, which goes as race 14 on Saturday afternoon at about 5:43 Eastern time at Gulfstream Park. And Scott, I mean, without really anything else to say, this marks the return of 2022 two-year-old Eclipse Award winner Forte, who comes in with 3 straight victories, including the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He doesn't need much introduction from us. He's way the horse to beat.
He absolutely is. It'll be interesting to see what price he goes off of here. But what I do know is based on pretty much any speed figure or performance rating, if he just runs back to any of his 3 efforts as a 2-year-old, he's going to be extremely tough to beat, let alone take a step forward. So I guess you have to ask yourself, what price are you willing to swallow in this field with a horse that is coming back off the layoff, Nick? And I mean, we have seen some horses that wowed us to an extent at 2 not come back in their first start at 3 thus far. But Forte was a step above anybody that we saw last year that's returned thus far, other than maybe Arabian Night. It's going to be interesting with Forte. If Todd's going to have him fully cranked, which you wouldn't think, he'll look to make him, the Derby his 3rd start off the layoff. But even if 85%, Forte the clear horse to beat.
Yeah, you wonder indeed how much of a step forward he's going to take as a 3-year-old. As you said, and a lot of times these horses really excel as 2-year-olds, and they're just a little bit more ahead of the curve than everybody else. I don't know if that's going to be the case with him. He's a horse that just felt like he was getting better and better as a 2-year-old. And again, just holds a massive advantage in terms of speed figures over these rivals. Well, let's go down to the rail to General Jim, who I know is your top pick. What do you like about him stretching out off a win in the Swale?
Well, first and foremost, Forte, the likeliest winner here. So anybody listening, don't get the sense that I'm against Forte by any stretch, but I'm a little bit concerned about what price he'll be. So I went with General Jim. I think a mile and a 16th might be stretching things, but we know at Gulfstream Park, these mile and a 16th races, you don't always need to be a Kentucky Derby type to be, a mile and a quarter type to get the distance. He did run a pretty good race, a couple of them actually at 2 turns on the turf as a 2-year-old. Shug McGady's won this race 3 times. And Louis Saez is going to have him in the right spot here. So like I said, the mile and a 16th going to be stretching things, but I think he gets a really good pocket trip. He hasn't done much wrong, especially with Louis Saez aboard. So I think he'll be pretty decent value. We'll see if he can get the mile and a 16th over the main track.
One of the other prior grade 1 winners in the field is number 6, Blazing Sevens, who's 7-2 on the morning line. He was bested by Forte in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last time out. Is it possible for Blazing Sevens to bridge that gap? This is a horse who was a fast 2-year-old as well.
He was. He's the horse I'm going to take a chance against, even underneath in this spot. His best effort was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile got the best speed figure, but it was the mile effort over the slop in the Champagne at Belmont, or actually at Aqueduct back on October 1st. That was kind of his most eye-popping victory. I've got a couple of questions, though. Is he a true 2-turn horse? How talented is he? And then you look at Chad Brown's Derby-type horses over the last several years, and none of them have won off the bench. Sandin, of course, the most recent, finished 3rd in the Risen Star after that good effort in the Remsen. Highly motivated, finished 3rd in the Gotham at 4-5 in his first start off the bench. Good Magic, who I think is probably Chad's best ever run in the Derby. Well, he finished 2nd, so I'd say that's fair. He was 3-5 in the Fountain of Youth after his first start in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So Chad Brown, obviously very capable of having runners ready to fire fresh, but I don't think he's going to have him cranked, and I'm just not sure how good he really is.
Speaking of class tests, let's look at the 7 Mage, who makes his 2nd start off a debut victory back on Pegasus Day. That was very impressive. This looks like a little too much too soon to me.
I agree with you. Now, the pedigree suggests that 2 turns shouldn't be an issue, and he might have a pace edge in here. We'll see how a couple of other riders ride this race, but it is a lot to ask. I mean, a 7 furlong victory, not an easy distance to win at. He won nicely in that spot. I think it was an okay group, and he dominated them. So don't want to hold what was behind him against him. But I agree with you, Nick. It's a lot to ask here, but does have some upside. So if you're going to play against Forte, if you're like me being against Blazing Sevens, he's probably a B type in this spot.
This is the second graded stake on the path to the Florida Derby. The first was the Holy Bull, won by Rocket Ken. We knew going in that this was a horse that needed to run a lot faster, speed figure wise. He probably still does, but I don't think Rocket Ken is without chance to get that outside stalking trip and maybe get a piece of the pie here.
I think that's probably the highest, his ceiling in here, finishing underneath. Although, that was a good effort. He's run some fast races, like you said, needs to get faster. Should get the jump on Forte and Blazing Sevens, which would be an advantage. Not necessarily. They might be keen off the layoff and be more involved than we expect them to be. But yeah, I think Rocket Can has a decent chance at hitting the board at 8-1.
It's going to be tough for anybody to slay the dragon that is Forte. There's no doubt about that, Scott. And when push comes to shove, you're trying an alternative in general, Jim, but we all know that this 7-5 morning line favorite is probably going to look a little more like 3-5 when all is said and done.
Without question. If you're going to try to beat him, this might be the spot, but he's just faster, classier, and better than these horses. All he has to do is replicate those 2-year-old efforts, and they're running for second place.
Great to see the champ back on Saturday afternoon in race 14 at Gulfstream Park, the Fountain of Youth. For Scott Shapiro and Nick Tammaro here, make sure you're playing along at TwinSpires.com. Thank you, and until next time, best of luck.